I was seeing my husband off at the bus station to visit his parents. After telling me I looked pale, he brought me some water, and when he stepped away to check his luggage, a janitor walked up to me and said quietly, "Please, listen to me. When your husband comes back, do not drink that water. Pour it into the planter nearby and wait a couple of minutes. You will see for yourself." Before we begin, write in the comments where you are watching us from. We are very interested. We wish you a pleasant time listening to this captivating story. Chloe woke up before her alarm. It was still dark outside the window. Only the street lamp in the courtyard cast an orange stain on the ceiling. Jason was asleep next to her, turned toward the wall, the blanket pulled up to his chin. She lay there for a minute, listening to his breathing, then quietly got up and went to the kitchen. The coffee maker, 2 scoops of grounds, sugar, milk from the fridge. Right there on the door shelf were 3 bottles of vitamins prescribed by her physician. Chloe splashed milk into her mug, shut the fridge door, and stood by the window. In the courtyard, a scruffy ginger cat was creeping along the fence. From the neighboring apartment building, old Mrs. Higgins came out wearing rain boots and a quilted jacket over her bathrobe, shuffling toward the dumpsters. An ordinary morning, 7 years. She and Jason had been together for 7 years. In a month, it would be exactly 7. She remembered how he proposed without a ring, without a fancy restaurant, just on a bench outside her apartment building on a July evening as they walked back from the movies. He just said, "Chloe, let's get married. I feel good when I'm with you." She laughed and said, "Let's do it." On the way home, they bought 2 vanilla soft serves in waffle cones. He gave her a ring a week later, a thin, gold band with a tiny little stone. She still wore it, even though the stone had fallen out a long time ago, leaving an empty setting. From the outside, they were a regular couple. He worked as a supply chain manager for a logistics company. She was a bookkeeper at a private dental practice. Every morning, it was the commuter bus, then a transfer, then a 10-minute walk past the farmer's market. A quiet, paper-pushing job with the smell of medical antiseptics from the hallway and the eternal hum of the dentist's drill through the wall. Chloe loved numbers. They held an order that she sometimes lacked at home. They had no children. This topic hung between them like a curtain that both could see but pretended wasn't there. Chloe had brought it up carefully a few times, casually. Jason always answered the same way. "Not right now. Let's get on our feet first. We have the car loan. We're saving for a down payment on a house, what kids?" Chloe would agree because his arguments sounded reasonable. But she was 34, and at night, she would sometimes open the calculator app on her phone and do the math. If I get pregnant at 35, having a baby at 36 is still fine. At 37, it's okay too. But after that, she would close her phone, having resolved nothing. Over the last year and a half, something shifted. There wasn't a specific moment, but rather a slow sliding, like a crack in the drywall that you only notice when it stretches across the entire ceiling. Jason became irritable. He would flare up over nonsense dinner being underseasoned, a light left on in the hallway, the TV being too loud. He never used to notice these things, but now he snapped, slammed doors, went out to the balcony to smoke, and stood there for 20 minutes. Chloe would approach him, ask what was wrong, and he would wave her off. "Nothing. Work is just stressing me out." He started coming home late. He used to be home by 7. Now it was 9, sometimes 10. Business trips, a new contract, the boss piling on work. Chloe didn't check up on him, not out of trust, but out of pride. She didn't want to be that wife who calls her husband every hour, digs through his pockets, and sniffs his shirts for cheap perfume. But the phone was glaringly obvious. Jason started carrying it everywhere, into the bathroom, onto the balcony, even when he just went out to take out the trash. He used to leave it lying around anywhere. Now it was always in his pocket. In the evenings, he would sit on the couch with it, shielding the screen with his hand, and when Chloe walked by, he would flip it face down. Small movements, nothing dramatic, but they formed a pattern. Chloe forced herself not to see it. She told herself, "He's tired, he's stressed, it's just work group chats, don't make things up," and she almost believed it. And then, the life insurance happened. It was late May. Jason came home from work earlier than usual. Chloe was frying pork chops. The kitchen was hazy, smelling of onions and hot oil. Jason walked in, hung up his jacket, and placed a clear plastic folder on the dining table. "Chloe, sit down. We need to talk." She wiped her hands on a towel, turned down the stove burner, and sat across from him. "I was thinking, we should get life insurance for both of us. You never know, an accident, an illness. A guy at work got into a bad car wreck, 3 months in the hospital, surgeries, and no insurance. His wife almost had to sell their condo. Is it expensive? No, it's reasonable. Small monthly premiums, but the payout is serious if something happens to either of us." Chloe scanned the papers with the insurance company's logo. The coverage amount was massive, but Jason had already prepared everything. Sticky notes, a pen, pencil X's on the signature lines. Chloe signed without reading the fine print. She trusted him. Jason gathered the papers and took them to the bedroom. During dinner, he was unusually cheerful, told a story about a coworker, opened a beer, and even washed the dishes. Chloe thought, maybe I'm just overthinking things. Maybe it was just a phase, and he's over it. 2 months later, her ailments began. First, a mild nausea in the mornings. She was actually thrilled. A crazy thought flashed through her mind: pregnancy. But the test showed a negative result. The nausea turned out to be of a different nature, a viscous, lingering background feeling, as if she had eaten something bad that just wouldn't digest. Then came the weakness, an unusual, heavy, enveloping fatigue, dizziness in the mornings and after meals, a strange metallic taste in her mouth. Chloe went to her primary care doctor. Complete blood count, urinalysis, thyroid check, nothing serious. Hemoglobin was a bit low, blood pressure on the lower side. The diagnosis: exhaustion and a vitamin deficiency. She was prescribed B-complex vitamins and iron. She was told to sleep more and get some fresh air. Jason grew worried. He started bringing her tea in bed, green tea with honey and ginger. He said he found the recipe online. He made fresh squeezed carrot and apple juices. He reminded her to take her pills. He placed a bottle of water on her nightstand before bed. Chloe felt a pang of guilt. Her husband was taking care of her, and she had been attributing spy novel motives to him. She didn't notice the pattern, or perhaps she didn't want to. Her symptoms worsened whenever Jason was home and cooking for her. When he left on business trips, which were happening more frequently, she felt noticeably better. 2 or 3 times a month, Chloe would feel a vast improvement. The nausea would retreat, her head wouldn't spin, the metallic taste disappeared. She slept soundly, made herself simple meals, and took walks after work. She found a convenient explanation. Without her husband around, she was less stressed and slept better. Stress affects the body. Everyone knows that. That was what she told herself, and she believed it right up until one October morning. The night before, Jason's mother called. Chloe heard his voice from the balcony through the cracked door. "Yeah, Mom, I get it. I'll come down tomorrow morning. I'll bring groceries. Don't worry. We'll sort it out." He came back inside, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Dad's really doing poorly. Blood pressure is spiking. His back is out. He can't do anything around the house. I'm gonna head down there tomorrow for about 5 days. Fix the fence, drop off some food. Do you want me to come with you?" "No, you have work. Plus, you can barely stand up as it is. Better just rest." Chloe didn't push it. To be honest, the thought of being alone for a few days brought her a quiet sense of relief. They left the apartment at 7 a.m. It was early October, but the air already felt biting, damp, and sharp. The sky was covered in a gray haze. Yellow leaves, stuck to the wet pavement, rustled under their feet. Jason carried a large duffel bag, an old plaid one his mom had given him years ago. Chloe walked beside him, her jacket zipped up to her chin. It was a 20-minute walk to the Greyhound station. They walked in silence past the closed grocery store, past the playground with the crooked swings, past the bus stop where 3 guys in work clothes were waiting. The station smelled of diesel fumes and wet asphalt. Near the last bench stood a large concrete planter filled with chrysanthemums, yellow and burgundy, standing strong despite the first frost. Nearby, an older janitor in an orange safety vest was leisurely sweeping up leaves. Swish, swish, went the broom against the concrete. Jason dropped his bag, went to the ticket counter, and came back with his boarding pass. He looked at Chloe and frowned. "Why are you so pale? Head spinning again?" "A little. I didn't eat breakfast." "Hold on. Be right back." He went inside the station building and returned a couple of minutes later with a plastic bottle of water. The cap was already loose. "Here, drink some. I'm gonna go stow my luggage. The bus is already boarding." He grabbed his bag and walked briskly toward the platform. Chloe sat on the bench, holding the bottle. She brought it to her lips, and suddenly, the janitor materialized in front of her. He was a short, lean man, probably in his late 60s, his weathered face lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes were unexpectedly clear and sharp. "Excuse me," he said quietly, almost in a whisper. "Do not drink that water. When your husband comes back, act like you drank it, but don't swallow. Pour it into the planter." He nodded toward the chrysanthemums, "and wait a couple of minutes. You will see for yourself." Her first thought was, a crazy person, a bus station nut. But his voice was steady, without any manic edge. He spoke like a man who had been making a difficult decision for a long time and had finally made it. "Who are you?" Chloe muttered. "Just trust me, please." He backed away calmly, without looking over his shoulder, and returned to his broom. Chloe gripped the bottle, her knuckles turning white. Her heart was pounding. She looked toward the bus. Jason was standing by the luggage compartment, talking to the driver. 2 minutes, no more. Her body made the decision, not her brain. Her hands tilted the bottle toward the planter, and the water poured in a thin stream into the soil around the chrysanthemums. She did it quickly, stealthily, glancing over her shoulder. She left a sip at the bottom and screwed the cap back on. Jason returned. "Did you drink?" "Yes, thank you. I feel a bit better." He smiled his usual smile, leaned in, and kissed her forehead. His lips were warm and dry. "Go home and rest. I'll call you tonight. Tell your mom I say hi. Tell her not to overwork herself." He walked to the bus, took a window seat, and waved. Chloe waved back. The bus engine roared, releasing a cloud of blue exhaust, turned around in the lot, and merged onto the road. When the engine noise faded, Chloe turned to look at the planter. The chrysanthemums had changed. The leaves had curled and gone limp. The edges had blackened, and the stems were slanting. A large burgundy chrysanthemum had bent all the way to the dirt, as if its spine had been snapped. The petals had turned brown and translucent. The soil around it had darkened unnaturally. Her legs turned to jelly. Chloe sank back onto the bench and sat there, staring at the dead flowers. The station buzzed around her voices, PA announcements, horns, but she didn't hear a thing. Maybe it was a coincidence? Maybe it was bleach or rusty pipes. But chrysanthemums don't turn black in 10 minutes from rusty water. She didn't know how long she sat there. Then she stood up and, on unbending legs, walked over to the janitor. He was sweeping leaves near the curb. The broom stopped moving when he saw her face. "How did you know?" Her voice sounded raspy, completely foreign to her. The janitor straightened up and looked at her for a long time, as if weighing his words. "I work here every day, from 6 a.m. I memorize faces. It's a habit. Your husband has been here before, not alone." "What do you mean, not alone?" He leaned his broom against a light pole. "With a woman, young, blonde, looked about 25. They would come here together, sit at the cafe across the street, that one over there, past the bus stop with the blue sign. I wouldn't have paid any mind. Could be a sister, a coworker, but they didn't sit like coworkers. Hands on the table, fingers intertwined. She was laughing. He was whispering in her ear. Chloe stood there, her hand gripping the metal railing tightly. The metal was cold and wet. "I still would have kept my mouth shut," the janitor continued. "Other people's lives are none of my business. But a couple of weeks ago, I was sweeping near the cafe. They still had their patio tables out, and the window was cracked open. They were sitting right by the window, and I was sweeping the sidewalk a few feet away. She was talking to him loudly, angrily, not caring who heard. 'I'm done waiting. You promised the issue would be resolved after the insurance policy. Or I'm leaving.' And he replied quietly, 'But I heard it. Soon. I found what to mix in, gradually, so it looks like an illness.'" Chloe's vision darkened. She swayed, and the janitor quickly put a hand out, catching her elbow. "Have a seat," he said. Over there on the bench. Breathe. She sat down. The world was spinning. The station plaza, the buses, people with suitcases. Everything moved in slow motion, like underwater. The janitor stood nearby. He didn't leave. I remembered his face, he said when Chloe finally looked up at him. And today I recognized him. I saw him go into the convenience kiosk, buy the water, but he didn't come right out. He lingered by the counter, with his back to the room. I was standing by the door, sweeping leaves. The door was propped open. I saw him pull a small dropper bottle from his pocket, unscrew the water cap, and drop something inside. Quickly, smoothly, like it wasn't his first time. He hid the little bottle, screwed the cap on, and walked over to you. Chloe listened, and every word dropped like a stone down a well. Deep, echoing, bottomless. "Why didn't you go to the police?" she asked, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. The janitor rubbed the back of his neck and looked away. "I was going to, I swear. But then I thought, who am I? A janitor, a retiree. I overheard a snippet of a conversation at a cafe. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they were talking about a movie, a script or something. Going to the cops without proof, they'd just laugh me out of the station. But today, when I saw him dropping stuff into the bottle, all doubt vanished. I couldn't stay quiet." He paused, then added, "Listen, I worked as an EMT in a rural county for 30 years. I've seen it all. When you hear a man say, 'I found what to mix in so it looks like an illnesses that's not a movie,' words like that carry a different weight." Chloe nodded, holding onto the back of the bench as she stood up. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you. Are you going to the police?" he asked. "Yes, I will. But first, I need to." She didn't finish. She turned and walked toward the exit of the station, pulling out her phone to call an Uber. Her legs carried her on autopilot, while inside her head, there was a ringing, white emptiness. The driver was talkative, rambling about traffic, the weather, gas prices. Chloe sat in the back seat, clutching her bag with the water bottle against her chest, and said nothing. The driver caught her eye in the rearview mirror, stumbled over his words, and fell silent. Once home, the very first thing she did was pull a clean, empty glass mason jar from the cabinet. She carefully poured the remaining water from the plastic bottle into it, screwed the metal lid on tight, and hid it on the top shelf of the fridge, behind a carton of milk. Then she sat down at the kitchen table. The clock above the door ticked steadily, counting the seconds. On the table sat her unwashed morning coffee mug. Next to it was a salt shaker with a chipped edge that she and Jason had bought at a state fair during their first year of marriage. On the windowsill, a pot with a dead violet gathered dust. Chloe had been meaning to throw it out, but kept forgetting. She sat and looked at it all at the kitchen where she had lived for 7 years, at the floral curtains she had picked out herself, at the souvenir magnets on the fridge from their few vacations. Florida, the Bahamas, that one trip to Cancun. At the fridge where, behind a carton of milk, sat a jar of water that had killed flowers in 10 minutes. She sat motionless for 2 hours. She didn't cry. There were no tears. There was only a crushing weight, as if someone had placed a sandbag over her shoulders and forgotten to remove it. At exactly 8 p.m., Jason called. Chloe was standing by the kitchen window when the phone rang, and she stared at the screen with his name for several seconds before answering. "Hey, did you get there okay?" "Yeah, fine. 5 hours bumping along on an old bus. But it's all right. Mom met me, fed me some homemade stew. Dad's in bed complaining about his back and blood pressure. I'm gonna start on the fence tomorrow. It's totally leaning over." "I see. How was your day? Did you rest?" "Yeah. I took a nap after lunch. Feeling a bit better." "That's good. You didn't forget your vitamins?" "Good girl. All right. I'll call you tomorrow. Get some sleep. Good night. Tell your mom I said hi." She hung up. Her hands were shaking slightly, like she was cold, even though the apartment's heating was blasting. His normal voice, calm, domestic. Stew, the fence, her vitamins. The man she had fallen asleep next to and woken up next to every day for 7 years was asking if she took her vitamins. And this was the same man who, that very morning, had squeezed something into her water bottle while hiding from the security cameras. Chloe got into bed but didn't sleep. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. On the wall opposite the bed hung their wedding photo in a wooden frame. She was in a white dress holding a simple bouquet. He was in a suit, both of them smiling. The photographer had asked them to kiss, but they had just laughed and pressed their foreheads together instead. It was a great shot, candid, real. She lay there and thought, When exactly did you decide? When you were sitting with me in this kitchen signing the insurance papers, was it then? Or later, when that woman pressured you? When you slipped something into my tea for the first time? Did your hands shake? Or not? Did you get used to it? Did it become routine for you kissing me on the forehead in the morning and then dropping poison into my glass? By 3 a.m., she stopped asking questions, not because she found the answers, but simply because she was exhausted. The next morning, Chloe called her office and said she was taking a sick day. Her voice sounded so rough that her boss, Brenda, didn't even ask questions, just said, "Feel better, Chloe." She got dressed, took the mason jar out of the fridge, wrapped it in a towel, put it in a tote bag, and drove across town to a private medical lab. She deliberately avoided the local hospital network, where they might ask questions or require a doctor's referral. She chose a commercial facility where they accepted walk-ins and anonymous testing. The lab was on the first floor of a commercial park building. A white door, a sterile hallway, the smell of antiseptic. A young woman with her hair pulled back into a ponytail sat at the reception desk. "Hello. I'd like to submit a sample for chemical analysis." "What kind of analysis specifically?" "An expanded panel. I need to." Chloe hesitated. "I need to check if there are foreign substances in this water." The receptionist looked slightly surprised, but gave a professional nod and slid a form across the counter. "Please fill this out. Results will take 3 business days. If it's urgent, we have an expedited option, but it costs more." 3 days is fine, Chloe said. She filled out the form, paid with her credit card, handed over the jar, and walked out. It was windy. Ragged clouds raced across the sky, alternately hiding and revealing the sun. Chloe stood on the sidewalk for a minute, breathed in the cold air, and slowly walked to her car. Those 3 days of waiting became the longest of her life. She went to work, reconciled the ledger, ate lunch in the clinic's break room, came home, and cooked simple dinners for herself. Plain pasta, rice, scrambled eggs. She ate without appetite, mechanically washed the dishes, watched TV, and went to bed. And all that time, like a broken record, the timeline spun in her head. Chloe reconstructed it day by day, week by week, and with every coincidence, goosebumps crawled down her spine. The illnesses started about a month after the life insurance was finalized. July, the first wave of nausea. Jason was home on vacation for 2 weeks. He cooked every day, trying so hard, healing ginger honey tea before work, fresh squeezed juice after dinner, the water bottle on the nightstand. August, the nausea got worse. The fatigue hit. Jason went on a business trip for 5 days. By the 3rd day, Chloe felt almost normal. He came back, and 2 days later, it started again. September, the dizzy spells, the stomach pains. Jason left town twice. Both times, she improved. Both times he came back, she got worse. She remembered how happy she had been about his care, how he brought her tea in bed, and she, half asleep, gratefully took a sip without a second thought. How he placed the fresh juice on the table and said, "Drink up, you need the vitamins." How he filled her water bottle at night and kissed the top of her head. Good night. Every sip, every cup, every glass. On the 3rd day, the lab called. A polite female voice said the results were ready and asked her to come in person. Not over the phone. Chloe drove over during her lunch break. She was escorted not to the reception desk, but into a small office with white walls, a desk, and 2 chairs. Behind the desk sat a man in his 50s wearing a white coat, with short hair and glasses resting on the bridge of his nose. He introduced himself as the lab director. He asked her to sit. "We ran a comprehensive chemical analysis on your sample," he began, placing a file folder in front of him. "A high concentration of thallium sulfate was detected in the sample." He paused, as if giving her time to let the words sink in. "This is a highly toxic compound," he continued. "A single dose at this concentration would cause severe poisoning. Taken regularly, it has an accumulative effect: nausea, weakness, nerve pain in the extremities, eventually hair loss. In higher doses, it damages internal organs, the liver, the kidneys. With prolonged exposure, it can be fatal. Chloe sat perfectly still, her hands clasped in her lap. I have to be direct with you. The director took off his glasses and looked her in the eye. This is not accidental contamination. Thallium sulfate does not naturally occur in tap water, bottled water, or household cleaning products. It cannot be ingested by accident. This substance was deliberately added to your sample. I strongly advise you to contact the police. He handed her the folder, 2 pages stamped with the lab seal, graphs, and numbers. Chloe took them and carefully placed them in her bag. Her hands weren't shaking. She had done all her shaking over the past 3 sleepless nights, during the endless hours in her kitchen, mentally replaying every day, every cup of tea, every kiss on the forehead. Thank you, she said. You need to be examined yourself, the director added. If you've been exposed to this substance over an extended period, you need to evaluate the state of your internal organs. I can give you a referral to a specialist. Chloe nodded. Yes, later. First, I need to do something else. She walked out of the lab and stopped on the porch. People walked past a woman with a stroller, a boy on a scooter, an old man carrying groceries. An ordinary day on an ordinary street. She stood there, clutching her bag with the lab results to her chest, realizing that the world she had lived in for 7 years, tidy, understandable, familiar, had just collapsed permanently. Not with a crash, not with a scream. Quietly, just like those chrysanthemums at the bus station had bent over and blackened. That was it. The tears had dried up 2 nights ago, when she lay in the dark staring at the wedding photo, crying silently, teeth clenched, burying her face in the pillow. She had cried out everything for the last 7 years, the trust, the vanilla ice cream cones, the empty ring setting. Now, there were no tears left. There was only resolve. Chloe took out her phone and dialed the police. The local police precinct smelled of damp concrete and old furniture. A long hallway with peeling paint, a row of doors with nameplates, a wooden bench against the wall where a man in a dirty jacket was dozing, his head slumped to his chest. The desk sergeant behind the glass, a young guy with bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, listened to Chloe and pointed down the hall. 3rd door on the right, Detective Harper. She's catching cases today. Chloe knocked. A tired, "Come in," echoed from behind the door. The office was small and cramped, 2 desks, a filing cabinet, a barred window with a half-dead cactus on the sill. At the closer desk sat a woman in her 50s with a short haircut, wearing glasses perched on the tip of her nose and a dark blue blazer. Her face looked exhausted, with deep lines around her mouth, but her eyes were sharp and attentive. She looked up from her paperwork and silently pointed to the chair opposite her. Chloe sat down. She pulled the lab results from her bag, along with the plastic Ziploc bag containing the water bottle, her medical records, and a copy of the life insurance policy. She laid them all out on the desk, neatly, in a row, just as she arranged financial documents at work before an audit. I want to file a report, she said. My husband is trying to poison me. She said it, and shuddered at her own words. It was the first time she had said it out loud. Until this moment, it had been swirling in her head like a sealed jar, but now it broke free and hung in the air between them. Detective Harper's face didn't change. She didn't gasp, didn't lean forward, didn't ask her to repeat herself. She just took off her glasses, placed them on the desk, and said, "Start from the beginning. Take your time." And Chloe told her everything from the beginning. About the insurance in May, the illnesses that started in the summer, the ginger honey tea, the fresh juices, the water bottle by the bed, about the business trips where she miraculously felt better, about the morning at the Greyhound station, the janitor, the water in the planter, and the chrysanthemums that blackened in 10 minutes. About the private lab and the thallium sulfate, she spoke evenly, in chronological order, without skipping around, as if she were reading a corporate ledger. Detective Harper listened without interrupting, only occasionally making brief notes in her legal pad. When Chloe finished, the detective stared at her notes for a few seconds before looking up. "Do you still have the bottle with the rest of the water?" "Yes, right here." Chloe pointed to the plastic bag, "and I poured the rest into a glass mason jar." It's at home, in the fridge. I can bring it. Bring it. Private lab results are good for establishing probable cause, but we will need our own official forensic analysis. Do not open the jar. Do not add anything to it. Just bring it as is. Okay. Detective Harper picked up the lab report, flipped through it, and lingered on the page with the toxicology levels. Thallium sulfate, she said quietly, almost to herself. High concentration. This is a highly restricted substance. You can't just buy it at a pharmacy. Where could your husband have gotten it? I have a theory. Chloe shook her head. I don't know for sure. He works in logistics. They deal with warehouses, chemical suppliers, maybe through a contact. I don't know. That's fine. We'll find out. Tell me, this woman the janitor mentioned, do you know who she is? No. I didn't even know she existed until that day. I mean, Chloe faltered. I suspected he was seeing someone, but I didn't know for sure, and I didn't want to know. Detective Harper nodded. No judgment, no pity, just the nod of someone who had heard this hundreds of times. This janitor, what's his name? He didn't give me his name. Older, short, thin. Works at the bus station every day, starting at 6 a.m. Said he used to be an EMT. We'll find him. We need his statement. Now, this is the most important part. Detective Harper took off her glasses and looked at Chloe dead on, without sugarcoating. Where is your husband right now? At his parents' place. Out of town. He said he'd be gone for 4 or 5 days. Good. That gives us a window. Listen to me carefully. Not a word to your husband. Not a hint. When he calls, talk to him exactly like you normally do. Your voice, your tone, everything must be exactly the same. If he asks how you feel, say you're fine, just a little tired. Not better, not worse. Like always, he cannot suspect a thing. And if he comes back early, then double down on acting normal. But do not eat or drink anything he prepares. Make an excuse you already ate. Your stomach is upset. Whatever. But don't be dramatic about refusing. Don't raise red flags. Just avoid it casually. Chloe listened and memorized. This all felt unreal. She was sitting in a police detective's office discussing how to behave around her own husband so he wouldn't realize she knew he was poisoning her. Just like in a movie. Only in the movies, the heroine is glamorous and brave. While Chloe was sitting on a hard municipal chair in her old jacket, her hair unwashed, with dark bags under her eyes, and the only thing she wanted was to lie down, close her eyes, and wake up in a different life. Do you have someone you trust? Detective Harper asked. Relatives? Friends? Someone you can stay with if things escalate? My mom. She lives upstate, about an hour and a half away on the commuter train. Good. For now, stay home, go to work, act normal. But if anything feels off, if you feel in danger, call me immediately. Here is my card. She slid a business card across the desk, and then pack a bag and go straight to your mom's. Deal? Deal. Detective Harper stood up and extended her hand. Her handshake was firm and dry, the grip of someone used to taking control of a situation. We are going to open a case, she said. Tomorrow morning, bring me that jar. Then go to a hospital and get a full heavy metals blood panel done. If he's been poisoning you systematically, there will be traces in your system. That's evidence too. Chloe nodded, grabbed her bag, and left the office. In the hallway, the man on the bench was still dozing. The desk sergeant behind the glass was on the phone. Somewhere, a door slammed. An ordinary day at an ordinary police precinct. It was already dark outside. Chloe stepped out onto the porch and stopped. The air was cold. With a hint of wood smoke, someone in a nearby neighborhood was burning leaves. The street lamps glowed yellow. The asphalt glistened from a light drizzle. She stood there and thought that, for the first time in days, she felt something resembling solid ground under her feet. It wasn't relief, and it certainly wasn't peace, far from it, but it was something like a foundation, like she had been walking on thin ice and had finally stepped onto the shore. The shore was rocky and freezing, but at least it wouldn't cave in under her. The next few days were an endurance test. Jason called every evening at 8 p.m., right on schedule. He talked about his dad one day better, the next worse, spiking blood pressure. The doctor came by, prescribed new meds. He talked about his mom baking pies, canning 3 jars of preserves, nagging him that he wasn't eating enough. About the fence turned out they needed to replace 2 whole posts, so he had to drive to the Home Depot. Normal domestic chatter. His voice was familiar, warm, slightly tired by the end of the day. The very same voice that had told her good night and good morning for 7 years. The voice that said, "Let's get married on the bench outside her apartment." "How are you holding up?" he would ask every time. "I'm all right. Work, home, just a little tired. Taking your vitamins?" "Yeah, good girl. I'll be back the day after tomorrow. Or maybe a day later. My mom wants me to stay an extra day." "That's fine, of course. Don't rush. Help your dad out." Chloe would hang up and stand by the window for a long time, looking out at the courtyard. The cat was lying on a manhole cover, soaking up the day's residual heat. Mrs. Higgins was carrying a plastic grocery bag. In the windows across the way, the blue glow of televisions flickered. Normal life. An ordinary evening. She stood there thinking. "You ask me if I'm taking my vitamins, and your voice sounds caring, sympathetic. Are you a good actor, Jason? Or no, you're not even acting. You're just used to it. You're used to saying one thing and doing another. Maybe you don't even have to fake it. Maybe, right when you call, you genuinely feel something concern, attachment, habit, and then you hang up and think about something else. About her, about the money, about when all this will finally be over." Chloe went to work as usual. Spreadsheets, invoices, billing codes, a familiar stream of data that required zero emotional input. Her coworkers didn't notice a thing. Except for Brenda, the other bookkeeper she ate lunch with, who said one day, "Chloe, you look kinda gray lately. Maybe you need to use some PTO?" Chloe waved it off. Seasonal bug. It'll pass. Home was much harder. The apartment, which used to be just an apartment familiar, lived in, hers now felt like a movie set, as if every object had a sinister double meaning. The coffee maker he used to brew her healing tea, the blender he used for the juices, the nightstand where the water bottle sat. Chloe caught herself avoiding the kitchen, trying not to touch anything he had touched. She knew it was irrational. He was out of town. She was safe here. But her hands recoiled on instinct. She ate very little. She bought prepackaged food at the supermarket, instant oatmeal, bread, bananas. She drank water only from brand new, factory-sealed bottles she cracked open herself. She steeped her own tea bags straight from the cardboard box. Every time she brought a mug to her lips, she froze for a second, forcing herself to swallow, because she couldn't be afraid of her own kitchen. She couldn't live in her own home like it was enemy territory. But she was living exactly like it was enemy territory. She slept in snatches, waking up at every sound, a creaking floorboard, a neighbor's door slamming, the hum of the elevator. Every sound triggered an instant dump of adrenaline, a racing heart, sweaty palms, then silence. The clock on the wall, the orange glow of the street lamp on the ceiling, and another attempt to fall back asleep. One night, she got up, walked to the window, and stood there for an hour, staring at the empty courtyard, the bench, the sandbox, the bare oak tree. She wondered, are 7 years a long time or a short time? Long enough to truly know a person, or just long enough to get used to their mask? She didn't have the answer, and maybe she never would. Detective Harper called on the 3rd day. "Chloe, can you come down to the precinct tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We need to discuss a few things." Chloe drove down. In the office, alongside the detective, sat another person, a man in his 40s wearing plain clothes, with a buzz cut and calm, unreadable eyes. Detective Harper introduced him as Officer Davis. "We've executed several steps in the investigation," Harper began, opening her file folder. "First, the State Crime Lab confirmed the results from the private facility. Thallium sulfate, high concentration. Second, we executed a search warrant on your apartment. Here is the paperwork." She flashed a document. "The search was conducted while you were at work. The apartment was secured afterward. Everything is exactly as you left it." "And what did you find?" Chloe asked, though she already knew the answer. She felt it in the way Harper placed the folder on the desk, in the way Officer Davis leaned slightly forward. In the bedroom, in the bottom drawer of the desk, hidden under some tools and old paperwork, we found an unlabeled dark glass dropper bottle. The contents have been sent to forensics, But we already have the preliminary results. It's the exact same chemical compound. Chloe closed her eyes. The desk, bottom drawer. Jason kept screwdrivers, electrical tape, and old utility bills in there. She never dug through it, not because he forbade it, but because she simply never needed to. There's something else, Detective Harper continued. We obtained a warrant for his phone records and cloud data. We recovered text message history with a contact saved as Jessica L. The logs go back 14 months. 14 months. Over a year. Chloe opened her eyes. Who is she? Officer Davis answered in a flat, businesslike tone, as if reading from a prompter. Jessica Valerie Lawson, 26 years old, works as a receptionist at a fitness club, single, rents an apartment on the west side of town. According to their texts, she and your husband met about a year and a half ago. A year and a half. Right when everything started changing. The irritability, the phone guarding, the late nights. In the text history, Detective Harper opened a printed transcript to a flagged page. There are several excerpts directly relevant to this case. I'm going to read them to you, if you don't object. Chloe nodded. Detective Harper put on her glasses and read in an even voice. Message from Jessica, August 3rd. When are you going to fix this? I'm sick of waiting. You promised after the insurance policy everything would be quick. Your husband's reply. I'm working on it. I need time so it looks natural. The doctors can't suspect anything. Message from Jessica, September 15th. Either we finalize this before the end of the year, or I'm walking. I'm done with these games. Reply, soon. I'm upping the dose. By winter, it'll be over. The office went dead silent. You could hear someone walking down the hall with heavy footsteps. A door slammed. The cactus on the windowsill cast a small, spiky shadow over the stack of paperwork. Chloe sat with her fingers intertwined. She thought it would hurt, that these words would strike her like a physical slap across the face. But it didn't hurt. It was just empty, like someone had hit the mute button inside her chest. By winter, it'll be over. He wrote that on September 15th, and on September 22nd, he came back from a business trip with a new jar of ginger and said, I'm gonna make you some special tea. Found a great recipe, and she drank it. Of course she drank it. We also interviewed the witness, Detective Harper continued. Arthur Stevenson, 72 years old, janitor at the Greyhound station, former county EMT, 31 years of service at a rural hospital, retired 10 years ago, took the janitor job, as he put it, so he wouldn't just sit around doing nothing. His statement fully corroborates your timeline. He provided a physical description of the woman that perfectly matches Jessica Lawson's driver's license photo. He described the argument he overheard outside the cafe. And, crucially, he described your husband's actions inside the station convenience kiosk that morning. How he stood with his back to the security cameras and dropped something into the bottle. Cameras? Chloe asked. There's a camera in the kiosk? Officer Davis shook his head. There is. We pulled the footage. Unfortunately, the camera is pointed directly at the cash register, and your husband was standing by the snack rack in a blind spot. The footage shows him picking up the bottle and walking into the blind spot, but the actual tampering isn't caught on tape. However, we do have footage from the station's exterior cameras showing him and Lawson arriving together on multiple occasions over the past 2 months. This corroborates the witness's statement. So, to summarize, Detective Harper folded her hands on the desk. We have 2 forensic lab reports, the physical vial of poison found in his desk, the incriminating text messages, an eyewitness statement, and supporting video surveillance. The district attorney has approved charges for attempted murder in the first degree, with the aggravating factor of financial motive for the life insurance payout. We are going to arrest your husband the moment he gets off the bus. When? Chloe asked. Whenever he arrives back at the station. We know exactly which bus he has a ticket for. He won't make it past the platform. It'll happen fast and quiet. You do not need to be there for it. In fact, I highly recommend you are not anywhere near the station. Chloe nodded. She didn't want to be. She didn't want to see his face the exact moment he realized it was over. She didn't want to hear what lies he would spin. She didn't want to stand there and watch the handcuffs click shut around his wrists. Not out of pity, but out of self-preservation. She knew if she saw it, that image would burn into her brain forever, overlaying every other memory of him, and she would never be able to picture him any other way. "One more thing," Detective Harper said. "While he's being booked and we process the scene further, you shouldn't stay at the apartment. Go stay with your mother." "Okay." Chloe stood up. At the door, she turned around. "Detective Harper. What if the janitor hadn't walked up to me that day? What if I had just chugged that water?" The detective paused, then said, "Based on the concentration the lab found, a single massive dose would have caused severe acute poisoning. Not instantly fatal, but severe. Immediate hospitalization, IV drips, likely permanent liver or kidney damage. And if he had continued while you were weakened." She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Chloe walked out of the precinct. It was unseasonably warm for October. In the plaza outside, the building grew massive. Old chestnut trees, their spiky green husks and smooth brown nuts littering the ground. Chloe picked one up and rolled it between her fingers. Warm, glossy, heavy. She slipped it into her pocket and walked toward the bus stop. Jason called that evening, right on schedule. He said he finished fixing the fence and was taking the morning Greyhound back tomorrow. "I miss you," he said. "When I get back, let's go do something. Catch a movie, or just take a walk." "Sure," Chloe replied. "That sounds nice." Her voice didn't waver. She surprised herself with how calm she sounded. It was as if, over the past few days, something inside her had structurally rebuilt itself, hardening over, forming a thick protective bark over an open wound. "Well, all right. Talk tomorrow. I'll text you when we depart." "Sounds good. Have a good night." "Good night, Chloe." She set the phone down on the table and sat for a long time without moving. Outside the window, the wind swayed the street lamp, casting a pendulum shadow back and forth across her wall. From the apartment upstairs came muffled voices, her neighbors watching some late-night talk show, punctuated by bursts of canned laughter and applause. An ordinary evening. The last evening of this life, the one where she was Jason's wife, lived in this apartment, slept in that bed. Tomorrow, a different life would begin. In the morning, Chloe packed a duffel bag. Documents, passport, marriage certificate, social security card, medical records, a few changes of clothes for 3 or 4 days, no more. She looked around the apartment, the entryway, the kitchen, the bedroom, the floral curtains, the fridge magnets, the wedding photo on the wall. She hesitated, then took the photo down and placed it face down inside a desk drawer. Not out of anger, but out of an absolute inability to look at it. She double-locked the door and walked out of the building. Old Mrs. Higgins was standing by the bench, throwing breadcrumbs to the pigeons. Seeing Chloe with a bag, she asked, "Visiting your folks?" Chloe nodded. "Just for a few days." Mrs. Higgins waved her hand. "Good for you. Go check on your mother. She's all alone out there." Chloe boarded the commuter train and stared out the window for an hour and a half. Suburbs flew by, patches of woods, fields of dark autumn soil, railroad crossings with striped barrier gates. She didn't think about anything. Her head was empty, light as a helium balloon. Everything that needed to be done was done. Now, all she had to do was wait. The arrest happened the next day. Chloe heard the news from Detective Harper, who called mid-afternoon. "Chloe, everything went according to plan. Your husband was taken into custody right on the bus platform. He didn't resist. He's currently being held in lockup. Did he say anything?" He asked what the hell was going on. When he was read his charges, he shut up and demanded a lawyer. Chloe was standing on her mother's front porch, looking at the flower beds filled with fading asters. Her mom was inside, cooking lunch. The rich smell of beef stew wafted through the screen door. Her mother didn't know anything yet. When Chloe arrived, she just said, "Mom, I just need to be here for a bit. I'll explain everything later." Her mother looked at her, didn't ask a single question, just nodded and went to put the kettle on. "What happens next?" Chloe asked into the phone. "Next is the formal investigation process. Interrogations, depositions, confronting him with the evidence. We're bringing Lawson in for questioning as well. We'll likely need you to come in and give a formalized, recorded statement. I'll call you when we need you." "Okay, thank you, Detective Harper. Take care of yourself. And don't forget your follow-up doctor's appointments. You need to monitor your system." Chloe put the phone in her pocket. She stood on the porch for another minute. The wind rustled the dry leaves in the flower bed. Somewhere, a few houses down, a neighbor's dog barked lazily, out of habit rather than aggression. The air smelled of stew and fallen leaves. She walked inside. Her mother was standing at the stove, stirring a large pot. She turned and looked at her daughter. "Sit down and eat. The stew is ready." Chloe sat at the dining table. Her mom placed a deep bowl in front of her, one with a blue rim from the dish set she'd had since childhood. She put a slice of buttered bread on a side plate, all of it in silence, without demanding answers. Her mother always had this innate sense of when to press for details and when to just feed someone. Chloe picked up her spoon. The first sip of the hot beef broth burned the roof of her mouth, and suddenly, everything felt so simple, so painfully real, that her throat clamped shut. She put the spoon down, buried her face in her hands, and began to sob. For the first time in days, she cried truly, uncontrollably, gasping for air, just like when she was a little girl who had fallen off her bike and scraped both her knees. Her mother walked around the table, wrapped her arms around Chloe from behind, and held her tight. She didn't say a word. She just stood there and held her. And the stew cooled in the bowl, the clock on the wall ticked, and outside the window, the autumn wind chased the last dead leaves down the driveway. The investigation took 4 months. Chloe drove down to the precinct for depositions 3 times. Each time, she recounted the exact same story in a flat, even voice. From the beginning, Detective Harper asked clarifying questions, took notes, and occasionally asked her to repeat a detail. Next to her sat a stenographer, clacking away on a keyboard, a bureaucratic routine horrifying in its content, but a routine nonetheless. Jason denied everything at first. During his first interrogation, he claimed he had no idea what they were talking about, that he bought the water from the kiosk and didn't put anything in it, and that the vial in his desk was just a heavy-duty bug spray he bought at a hardware store for his parents' property. His defense attorney, a young guy in a wrinkled suit, nodded and scribbled furiously in a legal pad. But then the lab results for the vial came back. An exact chemical match. Then came the printed transcripts of his texts with Jessica. 14 months of messages where it was spelled out in black and white. The money, the insurance, the plan. By winter, it'll be over. Upping the dose. The doctors can't suspect anything. After that, Jason changed his tune. During his third interrogation, stripped of his previous arrogant confidence, he claimed it was all Jessica's idea. He said she pressured him, threatened to leave him, manipulated him. He claimed he didn't want to do it, but she left him no choice. "I never would have thought of doing something like that on my own," he pleaded, while his lawyer nodded, cementing the new defense strategy. Jessica was brought in for questioning a week later. She arrived looking immaculate, tall, blonde, wearing a beige trench coat, with a flawless manicure and a facial expression that Detective Harper later described to Chloe in one word: stone. She claimed she knew absolutely nothing about any poisoning. She admitted to having an affair with Jason, but said he told her he was getting a divorce. She claimed she didn't remember those specific texts, said she might have texted things in the heat of the moment, and insisted that resolving the issue meant him finally serving divorce papers, not murder. But the text history left no room for double interpretation. Found what to mix in, gradually, so it looks like an illness is not about a divorce, and upping the dose is definitely not about a divorce. The prosecutor charged Jason with attempted murder in the first degree, committed for financial gain to secure a life insurance payout. Jessica was indicted as a co-conspirator. The trial took place in February, 6 months after that October morning at the Greyhound station. Chloe attended court only once, for the reading of the verdict. She sat in the back row of the gallery, wearing her winter coat and a scarf, staring at the back of Jason's head at the defense table. He had lost weight, buzzed his hair short, and looked years older than his actual age. He turned around exactly once, locked eyes with her, and quickly looked away. She couldn't read the expression in his eyes, and she didn't care to try. The judge read the verdict, a long, monotonous drone of legal jargon. Chloe tuned in only to catch specific phrases: premeditated actions, systematic poisoning, financial motive, grievous bodily harm, and every word acted as another nail in the coffin of what used to be her marriage. Jason received a lengthy felony prison sentence. Jessica got less, but it was still hard time. When the judge struck the gavel, Chloe stood up and walked out of the courtroom, not waiting to watch the bailiffs lead Jason away. Outside, wet February snow was falling heavy and gray. She stood on the courthouse steps, letting the snowflakes hit her face, where they melted and mixed with something salty that she didn't bother wiping away. She had filed for divorce before the trial even started. Jason hadn't contested it. He signed the papers through his attorney without a single word. The process took a month. Chloe received the final divorce decree in the mail, filed it away in her document folder, and closed the folder for good. A year passed. Chloe sat in the kitchen of her new apartment. It was a small, one-bedroom place on the 4th floor of a standard suburban apartment complex. It was a rental, but she had made it her own. The walls were bare except for a calendar featuring kittens that her mom had given her. On a shelf by the window sat a few books she had brought from the old place. On the nightstand sat an alarm clock and a glass of water that she had poured herself. On the windowsill sat 3 pots of chrysanthemums, yellow and burgundy. She had bought them at a farmer's market in early fall. She saw them, stopped in her tracks, and couldn't walk past. The vendor asked, "Which ones? White? Pink?" Chloe shook her head. "The yellow and burgundy ones. Only those." She brought them home, placed them on the sill, and watered them. Every morning when she woke up, the first thing she did was check on them. They stood strong and alive. The petals were firm, the leaves a deep, healthy green. They were standing. She couldn't fully explain why she needed the chrysanthemums. Maybe as a reminder of what happened, of what didn't happen, of that morning when the flowers in the concrete planter turned black and died, and she didn't. Or maybe as a gesture of gratitude, or proof of survival. Look, these are alive. That means you are alive too. Chloe had gone through extensive medical treatment. Her blood panels had shown elevated levels of thallium in her system, not critical, but highly significant. The doctor told her she was incredibly lucky. The dosage had been meticulously calculated for long-term accumulation, not an instant lethal strike. If it had continued for another 2 or 3 months, the organ damage would have been irreversible. Chloe was put on a strict regimen, IV flushes, chelating medications, a specialized diet. 6 months later, her labs finally returned to normal. Her hair stopped thinning. The nausea vanished. Her energy returned slowly, reluctantly, but it came back. She changed careers. She quit the dental clinic and took a job as a bookkeeper for a mid-sized construction firm. Not because her old job was bad, but because she wanted a clean slate. Everything from scratch. A new office, new coworkers, a new commute, a different bus route, a different transit stop, a different view out the window. In the evenings, she started going for walks. Back when she was with Jason, they almost never went for walks. He hated it, said he was too tired. Now, after dinner, she would throw on a jacket and just walk wherever her feet took her. Down the local river walk, through the city park, past historic Victorian houses with ornate porches, past new condo developments with laundry hanging off the balconies. She walked and listened to the city, the hum of traffic, snippets of conversations, music drifting from open windows. Sometimes she would stop by a storefront, or a bench, or a water fountain, and just stand there, breathing. Once a month, she went down to the Greyhound station. Arthur Stevenson still worked there. Every day, starting at 6 a.m., wearing his bright orange safety vest and holding his broom. Chloe would bring him a mason jar of homemade apple butter, or a batch of fresh apple hand pies. She baked them herself using her mother's recipe. He would act embarrassed, wave her off. "Oh, come on, you don't have to do that. I didn't do anything special." But he always took them. And they would sit on that exact same bench near the entrance, right next to the concrete planter, which had since been replanted with fresh flowers. They just sat, sometimes in silence. Chloe would pour hot coffee from a thermos. Arthur would warm his hands on the mug and squint up at the sun. The station lived its own life. Interstate buses rolled in, passengers disembarked, Uber drivers idled at the curb, the familiar noise, the familiar smells, diesel exhaust, fast food, wet asphalt. Sometimes they talked. He told her about his late wife, Martha. She passed away 5 years ago from cancer. Went downhill fast. He talked about his daughter who lived out of state and called him on Sundays. About his grandkids, a boy who was 12, a girl who was 9. He pulled out his smartphone to show her pictures with glowing pride. He talked about the rural county hospital where he worked for 30 years delivering babies, setting broken bones. Once, he saved a guy's leg when the regional hospital surgeons wanted to amputate. Chloe talked about her life carefully, piece by piece, like a person relearning how to talk about herself, about the new apartment, the construction firm, about her evening walks, and how every night she discovered a new street she had never walked down before, about the chrysanthemums on the windowsill, about her mom, who called every single day and always asked, "Did you eat?" "A mother is a sacred thing," Arthur would say, nodding. "As long as your mother is alive, you aren't alone in this world. Take it from an old man." One day in late October, almost exactly a year after that morning, Chloe came to the station and brought apple pies and fresh apples from her mother's orchard. They sat on the bench. The day was crisp and clear, with a high, pale sky. The leaves had fallen weeks ago, and the trees around the plaza stood bare, thin, and fragile. Chloe took a sip of her coffee, stayed quiet for a moment, and then asked, "Arthur, what if I hadn't listened to you that day? What if I had just chugged that water?" He held his mug with both hands, staring past the bus bays at a gray strip of sky. "Then I would have gone to the police. I was planning on going anyway, to be honest. I was going to go that very afternoon. Why didn't you go earlier?" He went quiet, took a sip of coffee. "I was scared they wouldn't believe me. An old janitor walks into a precinct and says some guy is poisoning his wife. No proof, no lab tests, nothing. Just because I eavesdropped on a cafe date, people talk a lot of garbage. They would have told me, 'Go back to sweeping the sidewalk, Grandpa. Stop making up stories.' And if your husband found out someone was on to him, he might have gotten more careful, or he might have rushed the process. I thought about it a lot. I lost sleep over it every night since I heard them talking." He set the mug down on the bench and turned to Chloe. "But if you saw it with your own 2 eyes, that's different. Then you would know for a fact. Not taking a stranger's word for it, not based on a gut feeling, but seeing it yourself. And once you knew, you would go and do everything exactly right, which is exactly what you did." Chloe nodded. She knew. Now she knew for a fact. Not just about Jason, not just about the poison. She knew about herself. She knew that she was stronger than she ever thought. That it is possible to survive a betrayal, a real one, not the kind in books or movies, and still remain yourself. That you can relearn how to sleep, how to eat, how to walk down the street, how to talk to people, how to look at a sunset, and actually feel that it's beautiful. They sat for a little while longer. Arthur finished his coffee, stood up, and grabbed his broom. "All right, better get back to it. Management will chew me out if the wind blows all these leaves back onto the pavement." "Thank you," Chloe said. "For everything." "Ah, stop it." He waved a hand dismissively, but his eyes were warm. "Thank you for the pies. The apple ones are my absolute favorite." He walked toward the far end of the plaza, and soon the familiar sound drifted back over the concrete. Swish, 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 the broom against the asphalt. Chloe sat on the bench. The station lived its ordinary life. Greyhound buses arrived and departed. People reunited and people said goodbye. Someone was laughing. Someone was rushing to catch their connection. Next to her, in the concrete planter, stood the new chrysanthemums, yellow and burgundy, strong and bright. The wind rustled their petals, and they swayed, but they didn't break. They stood tall. Chloe finished her coffee, screwed the lid onto her thermos, and put it in her bag. She stood up and zipped her jacket. She lingered for one more second, looking at the chrysanthemums. Then she turned around and walked not straight home, but just forward, down the street, past the bus stop, past the old oak trees, past the storefronts and the street lamps. She walked and listened to the city living and breathing around her, and her footsteps steady, even, and calm, blended in perfectly with thousands of other footsteps. Thank you for listening to this story.